We now have the great pleasure of having two of our New Zealand Māori visitors speak to us. I'm going to introduce them together, although they are making separate presentations. Sir Tumu Te Heuheu is known to many of you already, and known usually as Tumu, is paramount chief and a direct descendant of Māori chiefs Te Heuheu Te Kino IV, who in 1887 gifted the central North Island mountains to the nation. He has a great many honours, including an honorary doctorate from Massey University, followed by a knighthood in 2009. And of interest to me, because something that wasn't mentioned earlier is that I'm chair of the Australian Heritage Council. Sir Tumu is the former chair of the World Heritage Committee and is a close confidant, therefore, and has been to governments and business throughout the world. He's a respected tribal leader and sits on a great many national boards and committees, so we're very privileged to have him. But before I invite him to the stage, can I indicate that following him, we have another guest from New Zealand. Tukurangi Morgan is chairman of Ye Arataura, the executive of the board of the company incorporated with some $800 million worth of assets in fisheries, forests, farming and properties. Perhaps from our point of view important too, and perhaps even more important, he was the principal negotiator for the outstanding Waikato Tanui treaty claims, which many people will be familiar with. He was co-negotiator along with Lady Raya Mahuta in the treaty settlement negotiations for the Waikato River claim. And the overarching purpose of that, as you'll see in your program, was to ensure the health and well-being of the river. And there is a single river authority, something that we've struggled with clearly in Australia, and this part of the world's very familiar with that struggle. So if I may ask Sir Tumu to the stage, and then he will be followed later. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings. I would like to begin by acknowledging the tangata whenua, the people of this land, the kaitiaki, the stewards for the future generations. My mountains greet your mountains. My rivers and waterways greet your rivers and waterways. My people greet you here in this place, your place. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, thrice greetings. It is once again my privilege and honour to be invited to participate in this conference, especially as it is taking place here in Adelaide, South Australia. The different circumstances prevailing within nations across the globe make it difficult to propose a single universal approach or standard set of guidelines. What might be appropriate in New Zealand may find little accommodation within Australia or Canada or Samoa. In that sense, there is a very specific national context within which the ongoing administration of each park or reserve must be considered. Yet, despite the different histories and the different priorities in modern times, there is also sufficient common ground to warrant discussion around the broad parameters that underpin the governance and management of parks and reserves, no matter where they might be. At an earlier park forum held in Sydney in 2010, I suggested 7 principles that were particularly relevant to a park in New Zealand, the Toroidal National Park. And I raise those principles again today, partly to illustrate the evolving nature of the relationship between the state on the one hand and the Māori tribes of New Zealand on the other, but also to see whether those same principles might have application beyond New Zealand and beyond tribal perspectives. In brief, the 7 principles highlighted in 2010 were: first, a principle based around the nature of a gift; second, a principle concerned with the historic associations attaching to land; third, the principle of responsible management; and fourth, the principle of power sharing; fifth, the retention of cultural values in current governance and management; sixth, a principle concerning the rights of future generations; and seventh, the principle of contemporary relevance. To further explain the significance of these principles, I would like to return to our own experience in respect of the Toroidal National Park. The Toroidal National Park was New Zealand's first national park and is located in the centre of the North Island. It includes 3 volcanoes, Tongariro, Ngauruhoe, and Ruapehu, the first 2 of which are dormant, while the third is at the very least tempestuous. The park was gifted to the nation by my great-great-grandfather, Tumu Te Heuheu, Tukino IV in 1887, and now covers an area of over 79,000 hectares. And apart from 3 ski fields, it also has 52 private club lodges for skiers, 24 tramping huts, and more than 1 million visitors each year. Within the park there is a village, Whakapapa Village, established many years ago and now home to around 150 people, rising to 400 in the winter months. In 1990, the park was made a World Heritage Site, and in 1993 was granted Cultural World Heritage status. And the park is administered by the Department of Conservation, Te Papa Atawhai. Although my own ancestors had especially close and long-standing relationships with the lands that make up the park, there are, in fact, a number of tribes who have traditional links to the territory, either because they live downstream from rivers that originate within the park, or because they have occupied contiguous lands, and sometimes lands within the park's current border. In 2009, the several tribes concerned united under the name of Ngā Kāhui Maunga, the tribes of the mountain, to discuss the current relationships with the park and with the park's future. At the ensuing discussions, the 7 principles were to unfold. And the first principle is about the nature of a gift. And although Te Heuheu Tukino had gifted the area as a national park, the relationship with the donor tribes did not automatically cease. Māori perspectives on land tenure are not unlike those of other Indigenous peoples, and recognise that the bond between tribe and territory is a perpetual bond that does not cease when the land is gifted or even when it is sold. So underlying this perspective is a worldview that links tribal identity with tribal land. And the people and the land form an inseparable whole that transcends legal title, or for that matter, any other form of alienation. There is an onus on tribes to ensure that the land is protected and its use and development is respectful of those perspectives and worldview. In short, at least in Māori worldviews, a gift of land does not release the donors from responsibility towards that land. A similar point emerging from the tribal discussions gives emphasis to the second principle, historic tribal associations. And these tribes have traversed the mountainous areas of the Toroidal Park for many generations. And ancient songs, chants, and narratives revolve around those journeys and have become embedded in tribal repositories. When my tribe, Ngāti Tūwharetoa, travels to other parts of the country, we are often welcomed as Toroidal, the name of one of the volcanoes in the park, rather than by the actual tribal name. In effect, the relationship is so close that one implicitly means the other. The mountain refers to the tribe as much as the place, while the tribal name refers to the mountain as well as the people. Given such long and unbroken links, national parks and similar commons have a human heritage that predates their current legal status by centuries, if not millennia. The third principle, responsible management, recognizes the management role of those who are appointed to govern or manage national or local sites, such as the Toroidal National Park. And in that case, the Department of Conservation, Te Papaatapai, carries the overall responsibility for the park, and like other agencies entrusted with parks management, must take into account the ecological, heritage, commercial, and political priorities. And in so doing, the links between the tribal donors and the Toroidal National Park have never been forgotten by the department, nor have they been relegated solely to the past tense. While from time to time the connections with the tribes have appeared to be more symbolic than real, the department has often defended the tribal views of safeguarding the park against entrepreneurial activities that would impact negatively on tribal heritage. And this is particularly so in recent times. The challenge for the principle of responsible management, however, is how management practices can successfully integrate all the value parameters associated with the park, particularly the natural and cultural values relevant to the past and the future. The fourth principle, the transfer of authority, concerns the way power is shared or not shared. Having had a rather peripheral role in the past, the Kahui Maunga tribes are keen that their own perspectives on the park's significance should be reflected in the governance of the Toroidal Park. And although Section 4 of the Conservation Act allows communities generally to recommend the values that should be reflected in parks management, the principle of partnership inherent in Section 4 is often interpreted as being fulfilled by consultation, rather than any transfer of authority. Furthermore, there is no legal mechanism within the national parks or the conservation legislation to ensure that power sharing can be addressed as part of an ongoing governance arrangement. In effect, the Department of Conservation carries the full responsibility. From the government's point of view, that might be a logical position. But from the tribe's perspective, leaving it all to the department does not satisfy the ongoing sense of responsibility that tribes have for the lands in question. A co-governance arrangement, the delegation of authority to current members of original donor communities, the transfer of title, or the appointment of kaitiaki or guardians are options that deserve serious consideration, as recommended in the Waitangi Tribunal ko Aotearoa tēnei, this is New Zealand, a report into claims concerning New Zealand law and policy affecting Māori culture and identity. The fifth principle, cultural values, is concerned with the beliefs, the ethics and histories that should be reflected in the park's management and governance. The values associated with sound conservation sometimes have universal application and make good sense regardless of culture. But quite often, conservation values are disassociated from the values of people. Should the values that underpin the governance and management of parks not only reflect principles of environmental protection, but also the cultural values of donors? The criteria for measuring cultural value are different from commercial valuations insofar as they do not depend on financial indicators or economic measures. Cultural values are also different from social indicators, which are much more concerned with human well-being and human relationship. While there is some overlap between cultural values and conservation values, the two dimensions are not identical. Since environmental values are primarily focused on the integrity of the natural environment without necessarily making reference to historic human associations, cultural values should be seen as totally related to social, economic, and environmental values, because changes in any one set of values will have implications for the others. A decision to develop a major tourist centre, for example, would have social, cultural, and environmental impacts, just as a decision to prohibit access to a park for cultural reasons would have considerable bearing on the rights of the public to enjoy a public facility. Cultural values include both tangible and intangible characteristics. Tangible characteristics are directly linked to the landscape and have cultural merit in their own right, while intangible characteristics do not necessarily depend on particular aspects of the landscape, but on the association between territory and people. However, distinctions between tangible and intangible qualities overlap and are seamless when viewed through a tribal lens. It is difficult to conceive any creation as a purely physical structure, which has no connection with an external world. The two dimensions, tangible and intangible, are brought together by an interaction of energy and a mutual connection along a continuum that includes people and their material cultures. In that view, heritage is seldom divorced from culture, people, and humanity. The sixth principle is about the future and the responsibility towards future generations. Tribal cultural heritage has a temporal dimension that moves simultaneously in two directions. Not only is a connection with the past highly valued, but when an object or site can at the same time demonstrate a link to the future, it is even more highly prized. Whenever the future is reflected in the past and future generations can relate to ancient treasures as if they were contemporary wonders, endurance is seen to have a timeless quality. Moreover, future generations have the right to expect that the natural environment will still be natural, at least in respect of heritage sites. The tribal donors of the Toroidal National Park do not wish to fossilise the park as a memorial to a bygone era, but neither do they wish to see a significant landscape modified to the extent that the essence, or the mauri, becomes lost to a series of competing man-made creations. The seventh point, contemporary relevance, needs to be explicit, since it could have significant implications for concessionaires and for a park's financial position. Inevitably, some of the values that are dear to tribal and community worldviews will conflict with commercial opportunities and profitable enterprises. Finding the balance between those diverse goals requires balance and wisdom and active engagement with the wider community. The aim need to be to reduce public access or public enjoyment of a park's facilities, but to ensure that the spiritual and cultural values that are part of the long-standing worldviews are reflected in both access and enjoyment. An important but often overlooked point is that these worldviews must be sourced from the actual tribe and or community that has heritage associations with the park. Contemporary relevance is about mediating between economic sustainability, cultural heritage, and provenance. And that may well be the most difficult task confronting park governance in years to come. The 7 principles described in this paper are presented as markers that have been important to the tribes of the mountain, ngā kāhui maunga, when considering their responsibilities to the estates of their ancestors. The principles have been presented today in the hope that they might be useful to the wider debates that will occur during deliberations at this conference. Thank you for the opportunity to join you all today and to share with you the discussions that have emerged from our tribes. Like most of you, we are working towards finding the balance between environmental and cultural protection and development between tangible and intangible qualities, between charitable and commercial operations, between tribes and the government, and between the interests of the tribes and the interests of all people. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, a kiro tātou katoa. Thank you.